Hey guys, Danica and Alana here, and we are going to show you how to optimize a hospital layout in SIMIO today. To get to your hospital layout, just in general, we're going to go to the Support tab here and click on Examples. We're going to find the Hospital Emergency Department right here, double click on that. And while this is loading, this is going to be a 3D model of what a typical emergency room looks like. So with doctors and nurses and patients coming in through the main door and through ambulances. And we're going to try and optimize something within this emergency room layout. So this pop-up is going to happen every time. It's just a general description. You can read through it if you want. It's not necessary for us today, though. So you can see this is your 3D model layout. Patients can come in through the entrance. They'll be in the waiting area post and pre-triage. They'd come back here to get assessed in a bed. Ambulances come up here to the side, and patients can come back into the rooms from there. So we want to optimize today. Well, first, there's lots of things that you could optimize. But for us today, we're going to be trying to minimize the wait time for patients out here when pre and post triage when they're waiting. And then we're going to be trying to maximize the revenue that the hospital makes in a day. In order to do that, we need to talk about the inputs and the outputs. So Alana is going to talk to you about the inputs here.
Okay, so there are many inputs that we could use, but for this, we're going to use 3. And those would be the number of doctors, the number of nurses, and the patient types. So we're going to go over here to the experiment 1, and we see that there are different scenarios that we're going to use. And as you can see, there's already 3 different responses that are already in here. Just ignore that for the moment. So the inputs we used, like I said before, was the number of nurses and the number of doctors. For the number of nurses, we have different scenarios that we use. We use them from a ratio of 1 to 1, 2 to 1, and so on. And we go all the way through 10 for both nurses and doctors. As you can see, there's 100 different scenarios that we use. And the patient types, like I talked about before, we're going to go over here to Model, and then Data tab. And we see that there are different probabilities for the 4 different types of patients that we're going to have. The numbers that SIMIO had before were 25, 25, 25, and 25. But we decided to change these to make it a more realistic model of what a hospital would look like.
So once we have those inputs determined, the patient priority and probability over here is just going to stay the same. It's not necessarily a changing input, but we did change this so that it'd be a more realistic model. So to talk about the outputs, we're going to come back over here to that experiment 1 tab, and this time we're going to talk about those response columns that Alana was talking about earlier to ignore. Now we are not going to ignore them. So originally, SIMIO is going to have 2 columns here with 2 completely different responses. Those are unnecessary for us. So you would come up here, click on the column, and hit Remove Response. Once those are removed, you can add responses with this button over here. So you'd hit that 3 times to add these 3 columns that we have over here. The 3 responses that we want for this scenario are the average waiting time before triage, the average waiting time after triage, and then what number of patients are treated per day. We called that throughput. So to change how these responses are made, we double click on the column title. We're going to come over here to this priorities box. And underneath expression, if I can click on this correctly, there's a little arrow here. We're going to click on that. And we already have these coded per se. I'm just going to go back through and show you how to do this. So for the average waiting time before triage, this little pop-up comes up and we drag it all the way down to the bottom. These are in alphabetical order. So we get down to waiting area before triage. So we're going to double click on that. And once you hit a period, the next screen pops up. And this one, we're going to hit processing. Hit that period again, and we're going to go to contents. And finally, we want the average time waiting. click that, hit that green button, and that will give you the correct response time. For the wait time after triage, we do the exact same thing, but this time on the first screen, instead of hitting waiting area before triage, we're going to do after triage. So we come all the way down to the bottom and we hit waiting area post triage instead of before. And then you go through and you're going to hit the same buttons of processing, contents, and average time waiting. Finally, to find the number of patients that go through the system in a 24-hour period, you find patients. These are in alphabetical order. It's going to come down to patients. Click on that. Hit that period. And the only one that comes up is population, so we're going to click on that. And finally, we're going to hit number destroyed. The way that this process works, it's not actually destroying the patients, but it's just saying how many number have gone through the system that we've completed. Completed is probably a better word here. So that is now programmed. We have all three responses. When you are doing this for the first time, though, there will not be any numbers in here. The way to do that is we're going to come back to the model, and we're going to get out of this data tab, go to the facility tab. There we go. And we want to make sure that this ending type over here says 24 hours. A lot of times SIMIO has it on 48 hours instead. So we just come down to run length and type in 24. The reason we're going to do that is it makes your simulation run faster, but it also is going to make it easier when we optimize things in Excel later, just the calculations. So once everything is ready to go, we hit this run button. And you're going to see people running around, the ambulances coming and going, and it takes a little bit, but once your simulation is complete, then back in the Experiment 1 tab, underneath those results columns, you're going to see numbers. That's all for this video. We're going to make another video showing you how to optimize those numbers in Excel.